Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to Life from Nerds. Hope you guys are doing well. Today we're going to be talking about watches that I believe are going to be future classics. I alluded to this in our video where we talked about watches from the future. It was kind of a similar play on words, but we're going to be talking about watches that I believe will, in 20, 30 years, 40 years from now, I believe these watches are going to be future classics, similar to some of the watches that we hail as classics today. But before we get into that, if you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button for my picks for these future classics, as well as subscribe to the channel if you are new to Life on the Wrist. So just to preface this, I want to kind of explain my thinking here and the way I went about picking my 3 future classics that I think we should all keep an eye on. So if you want to think of a watch that we consider a classic right now in today's age, you can think of, when you think of a future classic, you think of like the Rolex Submariner or the Omega Speedmaster. These watches were extremely influential during their time, and as collectors we find these watches to be extremely interesting and ones that we really want to have in our collection. So I'm trying to think of watches that kind of came out within the last 10 to 20 years that I think in 30 to 40 years are going to be hailed similarly to the Rolex Submariner or the Omega Speedmaster. I will say that these watches are not reissues or iterations on watches that were produced originally came out 30, 40 years ago. These are completely new watches that were produced within the last, let's say, 10 years and are not reissues on specific watches. They're completely their own references, their own design elements, and yeah, that's kind of the criteria that I went through in order to pick these 3 watches. So the first watch is from a company that I believe has started to get a lot of recognition for the amazing watches that they're actually making, and that is the Glashütte Original PanoMaticLunar. If you don't know, Glashütte Original is a German watch company that has been producing watches within the last, I'd say, 30 years. The styles of watches that they produce are very Germanic, very, very similar to watches that were produced by Lange. They're both located in Dresden, similar area to where they work out of, and very, very similar stylistic elements. This watch has very, very similar proportions to the Lange 1. It has in hours and seconds on the left side of the dial. You have the sub-seconds dial below the typical hour and minutes counter. Then at 4 o'clock you have this beautiful date window, which is very, very similar to the Lange date window. And then at 2 o'clock you have the moon phase. The reason why I think this is going to be a future classic is because Glashütte Original has really shown the capabilities of their company within the last 20 years, and I think this is kind of the epitome of what they are able to do. I think this is a perfect example of the types of watches that they can produce and the quality that of their output. I think this is, when it comes to a little bit more dressier watches, this is a perfect watch, and a little bit less expensive than Lange watches of similar caliber. I think Glashütte Original is starting to get their recognition, and it's only going to build for what they're producing. And I personally would guarantee that this watch would be extremely collectible in 30 to 40 years. So that's my first pick. The second pick, and this is going more towards watch companies that are being a little bit more ingenuitive within the watch world. And my second pick is the Zenith Defy Lab. If you don't know, the Defy Lab came out, I want to say a couple years ago, and it really it reiterated on the idea of how the mechanical movement can be made. Just looking at the watch from an aesthetics point of view, it has this very sporty, very familiar, sporty, and very likable shape. It's very, very similar to the AP Royal Oaks case shape. Very, very sporty, very, very chunky, but also extremely wearable. The reason why this is very ingenuitive within the watch world is they actually created a completely different type of movement. They created a thing called the Zenith oscillator, which essentially gets rid of about 30 components that are key to a traditional mechanical watch movement. And this new piece actually vibrates on the dial. And when you look at it and you can see the dial is actually skeletonized, you can actually see the oscillation of this piece within the watch. Things that are the conventional balance spring, and even the ruby palettes, those are actually removed from this watch because this oscillating piece is able to get rid of those. I will say that Hodinkee had a very good write-up on the Zenith Defy Lab, so if you want more information on this, be sure to search Zenith Defy Lab, where they actually explain how this movement was created. Jack Forrester was the individual who wrote that piece, and as always, he's very, very detailed in the way the movement is actually constructed and how it differs from the traditional mechanical movement. The reason why I think this is going to be a future classic, one, because it's extremely likable shape, and I don't think that the case design is really our demand for this type of case design. I don't think it's going to diminish. In fact, I think it's just going to grow. So one, it kind of ticks that box, but also it's creating a completely new type of movement that is proven to work like this. I think that's an iteration that we had on the way traditional mechanical watchmaking can be thought of, and this is a perfect example of us finding a way to change the traditional mechanical movement. Those are the two reasons why this is definitely going to be a future classic. And then the last piece is probably with no surprise, and I think this company has started to get a lot of recognition for the types of watches that they're able to create, and this is the Grand Seiko Spring Drive Caliber 9R65. I know that is a movement, but I'll speak about the movement first, and then the different types of pieces that you can get with this movement. So if you don't know, Grand Seiko is kind of like the higher-end mechanical watch making arm of company Seiko, who's really come into their own within the last 30-40 years. Grand Seiko actually produced a different type of movement, similar to how Zenith created the Defy Lab with a different type of movement. Grand Seiko actually created a movement called the spring drive movement. Now, the spring drive movement essentially takes an electronic regulator and marries it up with a traditional mainspring. So the regulation of the mechanical movement is done by this electronic piece, which allows for this watch to actually be a lot more accurate than traditional mechanical watches. The 9R65 was the first spring drive movement that Grand Seiko released publicly in 2004. And it actually has a power reserve of eight days. You can see the power reserve indicator at 8 o'clock. The date is actually located at 3 o'clock on the one that I'm showing you right now. It's a really beautiful watch. I think the movement itself is really another example of ingenuity within the watch industry, and it definitely pushed us forward as a watch collecting, I don't want to say society, but a group of people who are very, very interested in watches. When it comes to what spring drive watch to go for, there are so many different variations. I don't really think you can go wrong with your pick. I will say that the earlier versions of the spring drive movement, Grand Seikos, are probably going to fetch a lot more. Kind of like similarly how the Big Crown Rolex Submariners are hugely in huge demand. Ones that don't even say the Submariner on it, those are extremely high in demand. I think the Grand Seiko is going to be something similar to that. So again, it's ingenuitive. It's an example of our generation trying to push watchmaking forward. And I mean, it's Grand Seiko. People have started to give Seiko and Grand Seiko a lot more credit for the types of watches they're producing. So it's a beautiful watch and definitely a future classic. So those are my three future classic watches that I believe will be similar to the Rolex Submariner and the Omega Speedmaster in today's age. Just to reiterate, it's the Glashütte original PanoMaticLunar. The second is the Zenith Defy Lab, and the third is the Grand Seiko Spring Drive. The one that you really want to go for is the Caliber, with the Caliber 9R65 in it. Those are my three future classics. Let me know in the comments what you think about my three picks. Also, I'd love to hear what you guys think, what you, in your opinion, would be a future classic for watches. I think there's a lot of watches out there that have been produced, but I will say that you know, there are a lot of reissues and iterations on watches that were already produced. I think these are a good example of some original pieces that pack up a huge punch when it comes to watchmaking. I did not include any independent watch companies because I think that's a completely different discussion. These are kind of mainstream, very well-known watch companies. I think future classics within independent watch companies, that's a completely different topic, and I think I'd probably like to make that type of video. If you guys want me to do that, let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you didn't in the beginning of the video, be sure to slap a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about these. If you slap a like on this video, it helps me understand you like these types of topics, but also you like the 3 watches that I actually spoke about today. Also, if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and join the Life from the Wrist family. And with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time.